The Arctic wind howled across the barren landscape, biting at anything it could touch. The cold was relentless, a constant reminder of how fragile life was in this frozen wasteland. At an isolated research outpost buried deep in the ice, Carter adjusted the collar of his thick parka as he stared out the frosted window. Outside, the world was nothing but white, a sea of snow stretching endlessly under a pale gray sky.
Nice.
It was beautiful, but also lonely. Ethan wasn't one for small talk. He preferred the quiet hum of machines and the steady rhythm of scientific inquiry. That's why he had volunteered for this assignment, to get away from the noise of civilization and focus on what mattered most to him: discovery. His partner Rachel Meyer was different. She liked to fill the silence with chatter about her family back home or random facts she'd read online. But even Ethan had grown fond of her over the months they'd spent together here. Today, however, there was no time for idle conversation. Ethan stood hunched over a microscope in the lab, peering intently at a sample of soil extracted from beneath the permafrost. The layer of ice that had sealed it away for thousands, if not millions of years, had finally given way thanks to recent drilling efforts. This wasn't ordinary dirt. It held secrets from a time long before humans walked the earth, and Ethan felt certain those secrets were worth uncovering. "Anything interesting?" Rachel asked, leaning against the counter nearby. She sipped coffee from a chipped mug, her breath forming tiny clouds in the chilly air. "Not yet," Ethan replied without looking up. His voice was calm but tinged with excitement. "I think we're onto something big." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You say that every day?" "This time I mean it." He adjusted the lens slightly, narrowing his gaze. Under the microscope, the particles of soil shifted and shimmered, almost like they were alive. Something about their movement caught his attention. They weren't just inert pieces of earth. They were reacting to the light. "What do you see?" Rachel set her mug down and moved closer, curiosity piqued. "I'm not sure," Ethan admitted. "It's strange. Look at this." He stepped aside so she could take a look. Through the lens, Rachel saw what appeared to be tiny black specks floating in the solution. At first glance, they seemed insignificant. But then, as if sensing their presence, the specks began to cluster together, forming intricate patterns that pulsed faintly. "Is that normal?" Rachel asked, frowning. "No," Ethan said firmly. "Not at all." For hours they studied the phenomenon, running tests and taking notes. The more they learned, the stranger things became. These weren't simple microorganisms. They exhibited behaviors that suggested intelligence. When exposed to heat, they retreated into tight clusters. When subjected to sound waves, they vibrated in sync, almost like they were communicating. Ethan couldn't believe what he was seeing. No known species on Earth displayed such complexity at such a microscopic level. "We need to name it," Rachel said suddenly, breaking the silence. Ethan glanced at her, surprised. "Name what?" "The organism, if it's really as advanced. As it seems, it deserves recognition." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "Erebus," he said finally. "After the ancient Greek god of darkness," Rachel smirked. "Fitting." As the days passed, their fascination with Erebus grew. They worked tirelessly, determined to understand its nature. But the deeper they delved, the more unpredictable it became. One evening, while adjusting the lighting in the lab, Ethan accidentally left a bright overhead lamp shining directly onto the petri dish containing Erebus. Within seconds, the organism reacted violently. Its clusters dispersed, releasing a burst of energy that caused the lab equipment to spark and short-circuit. "What's happening?" Rachel shouted, backing away as alarms blared throughout the facility. "I don't know." Ethan scrambled to shut off the light, but it was too late. The power surge knocked out the main generator, plunging the entire outpost into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie shadows across the room. Rachel grabbed a flashlight and shone it toward the petri dish. What she saw made her stomach churn. The black specks had multiplied exponentially, spreading across the glass surface like ink spilled onto paper. Worse still, thin tendrils of the substance were creeping outward, seeping through cracks in the dish. "It's escaping," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan grabbed a pair of tongs and carefully placed the dish inside a containment unit. We need to seal this off immediately, he said, trying to stay calm. If it gets into the ventilation system, he didn't have time to finish the thought. A loud hissing sound filled the room as the tendrils breached the containment unit and slithered across the floor. Ethan and Rachel backed away, watching in horror as the substance consumed everything it touched, tools, wires, even chunks of the metal table. Shut it down, Rachel yelled, pointing to the emergency switch near the door. Cut the power. Hesitated. Shutting down the power would disable their communication systems, leaving them stranded. But if they didn't act fast, Erebus might engulf the entire outpost. With a deep breath, he flipped the switch. The room fell silent except for the faint crackling of electricity as the last remnants of power drained away. In the dim glow of Rachel's flashlight, they surveyed the damage. The lab was unrecognizable, its surfaces coated in a thick layer of black goo. Ethan's heart sank. It had awakened something far beyond their understanding, and now they were paying the price. We did this, Rachel murmured, shaking her head. We unleashed it. Ethan clenched his fists, guilt weighing heavily on him. No, he said quietly. This isn't our fault. We were trying to learn, to explore. We didn't know. But deep down he wondered if ignorance was truly an excuse. Erebus wasn't just intelligent, it was aware of them, aware of its surroundings, and perhaps even aware of the harm they had unintentionally caused. As they stood amidst the wreckage, a chilling realization settled over them. They had declared war on a species far deadlier than anything humanity had ever faced, and they had no idea how to fight back. The Arctic night stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of cold and darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole. Inside the outpost, Ethan Carter and Rachel Meyer huddled together in the dim glow of a single flashlight. The temperature inside was dropping fast, without power to run the heating systems, and their breaths formed frosty clouds in the freezing air. Neither of them spoke for a long time, too overwhelmed by what had just happened. Erebus, the name, now felt ominous, like a curse hanging over them. The black tendrils had stopped spreading, but they covered nearly every surface of the lab, pulsing faintly as if alive. Every few seconds, tiny sparks of electricity crackled along the edges of the mass, sending shivers down Ethan's spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that Erebus wasn't done with them yet. We need to figure out how to contain it, Rachel finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she tightened her grip on the flashlight. If it spreads outside... I know, Ethan interrupted, his tone sharp with frustration. But we can't do anything until we understand what it wants. Rachel stared at him, her brow furrowed. What it wants? Ethan, it's not a person. It doesn't think or feel like we do, doesn't it? Ethan countered, gesturing toward the pulsating mass. Did you see how it reacted to the light? How it spread when provoked? This isn't some mindless organism, it's intelligent. Maybe even more intelligent than us. Rachel opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. Deep down, she knew. He was right. Everything about Erebus defied logic. It behaved like nothing they had ever encountered before. Still, the idea of treating it as something with motives, something capable of wanting, felt wrong. Dangerous, even. Before either of them could say another word, a loud thud echoed through the corridor outside. Both froze, their eyes darting toward the door. Another thud followed, louder this time, accompanied by the sound of metal groaning. Under pressure. What is that? Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan grabbed a wrench from the workbench and crept toward the door. His heart pounded in his chest as he pressed his ear against the cold steel. The noise continued, rhythmic and deliberate. As though something or someone was trying to break in. It's probably just the wind, he muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. The door suddenly shuddered violently, forcing both of them to stumble back. A deep, guttural hum filled the air, low enough to vibrate through the floor beneath their feet. Then, as abruptly as it started, the noise stopped. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Rachel turned to Ethan, her face pale. We're trapped. He nodded grimly. We'll have to wait it out. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time became impossible to track in the oppressive darkness. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them, and they collapsed onto the floor. Wrapped in emergency blankets scavenged from storage, sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of black tendrils wrapping around their bodies, pulling them into an endless void. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., Daniel Harper sat in a dimly lit conference room, staring at a grainy video feed on a large screen. The footage showed the exterior of the Arctic outpost, partially obscured by swirling snow. Communication with the facility had been severed hours earlier, and attempts to re-establish contact had failed. Harper, a seasoned military strategist with years of experience handling crises, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "An entire research team goes dark in the middle of nowhere? Something's wrong." Across the table, President Catherine Monroe leaned forward, her expression grave. "Do we have any leads?" Harper hesitated. "Not much. But there's chatter among satellite operators about unusual energy readings coming from the area. Bursts of electromagnetic activity, unlike anything natural." Monroe frowned. "Could it be sabotage?" "It's possible," Harper admitted. "But given the location and circumstances, I doubt it. Whatever's happening up there, it might not be human." The room fell silent as everyone processed his words. The president exchanged glances with her advisors, none of whom looked particularly reassured. Finally, she spoke. "Send a team, find out what's going on, and bring back whoever's still alive." Harper nodded and stood, already mentally assembling a plan. Within hours, Captain Laura Bennett and her squad were briefed and en route to the Arctic, armed with state-of-the-art equipment designed for extreme environments. Laura, a no-nonsense leader with a reputation for getting results, took charge immediately upon arrival. As the helicopter descended toward the outpost, the team braced themselves for whatever awaited them. The sight that greeted them was unsettling. The building was eerily quiet, its windows dark and frosted over. Thick cables snaked across the ground, leading into the structure, and strange black streaks marred the walls. "Something's off," Laura murmured to her second-in-command, Sergeant Ryan Cole. "Stay sharp." Inside, the scene was worse than they expected. The lab was a disaster zone, coated in pulsating black tendrils that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat. At first glance, it appeared abandoned, but then they heard faint voices coming from deeper within the facility. Following the sound, they found Ethan and Rachel huddled in a corner, visibly shaken but alive. Relief washed over the rescue team at least until they saw the state of the lab. "What happened here?" Laura demanded, her voice sharp. Ethan struggled to explain, his words tumbling out in a rush. "It's called Erebus. We found it in the soil samples. It's intelligent, adaptive. When we tried to study it, it attacked." Laura glanced at the tendrils, which seemed to quiver slightly at the sound of her voice. "Adaptive, huh? That explains why our comms went down." Rachel chimed in, her tone desperate. "You don't understand. It's not just attacking, it's learning. It knows we're here." Laura frowned. "And you're sure it's alive?" "More than sure," Ethan replied bitterly. "That woke it up, and now it won't let us leave." The tension in the room was palpable. Laura considered their options. They couldn't stay here, but leaving wouldn't be easy not, with Erebus controlling the environment. She ordered her team to set up portable generators to restore power temporarily, while they figured out a way to neutralize the organism. But Erebus wasn't about to let them go so easily as soon as the generators roared to life. The tendrils surged toward the source of the energy, consuming it greedily. Sparks flew and the lights flickered before dying completely once again. Laura cursed under her breath, realizing they were dealing with something far beyond conventional threats. "Turn everything off," she ordered. "No electronics. Nothing that emits a signal." Her team complied reluctantly, powering down their gear. To their surprise, the tendrils slowed their advance, retreating slightly as if sensing the absence of hostility. Laura locked eyes with Ethan, who nodded in understanding. "It understands non-aggression," he said quietly. For now, anyway. Laura stepped forward cautiously, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. We're leaving, she announced, firmly addressing the pulsating mass as though it could comprehend her words. We won't hurt you. Just let us go. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the tendrils receded, clearing a narrow path toward the exit. Laura motioned for her team to move quickly, keeping her gaze fixed on the organism. As they filed out, she couldn't shake the feeling that Erebus was watching them, biding its time. Once outside, Laura radioed headquarters to report their status. The transmission was shaky, but it got through. Back in D.C., Harper listened intently, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the details. So it's intelligent, he mused aloud after ending the call, and it's learned to negotiate. Beside him, Dr. Megan Cole, the xenobiologist assigned to analyze Erebus, nodded thoughtfully. Intelligent organisms are rare, but not unheard of. What worries me is its ability to adapt so quickly if it continues to evolve. Harper didn't need her to finish the sentence. He already knew what was at stake. Humanity had stumbled into a conflict it wasn't prepared for, and Erebus wasn't playing by anyone else's rules. As the team boarded the helicopter, Laura cast one last glance at the outpost, now eerily silent once again. She couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of Erebus. Why, somewhere deep inside, she wondered if they'd made a mistake by walking away. Little did they know, Erebus was already planning its next move. The news spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within hours of Laura Bennett's team returning from the Arctic outpost, whispers of Erebus began to leak into the public domain. At first, it was just vague reports, scientists trapped in the Arctic, mysterious black tendrils, and an unknown organism that seemed to defy explanation. But as more details emerged, panic took root, spreading like wildfire across the globe. Social media exploded with theories and speculation. Some claimed Erebus was evidence of extraterrestrial life, while others insisted it was a government experiment gone wrong. Conspiracy theorists pointed to old sci-fi movies, drawing parallels between Erebus and fictional alien invasions. The truth, however, is far stranger and far more terrifying. President Catherine Monroe called an emergency meeting at the White House to address the growing crisis. Around the table sat military leaders, scientists, and advisors, all grappling with the enormity of what they faced. Daniel Harper stood at the head of the room, his expression grim as he reviewed the latest intel. We've identified traces of Erebus in 3 other locations, Harper announced, pointing to a map projected on the wall. Canada, Siberia. And Antarctica, it's spreading. Dr. Megan Cole leaned forward, her brow furrowed. It's not just spreading, it's adapting. Every time we think we understand it, it changes. We're dealing with something that doesn't follow our rules, Harper nodded, which is why we need a plan. Fast. Megan exchanged a glance with her assistant, Alex Rivera, who had been quietly taking notes throughout the meeting. Both knew how dangerous Erebus was, but they also understood its potential. If studied carefully, it could unlock secrets about biology and evolution that humanity had only dreamed of. The problem was balancing curiosity with caution, a line that seemed increasingly blurred. President Monroe turned to Megan. Doctor, you've worked with invasive species before. What do you recommend? Megan hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Containment is key. If we can isolate Erebus and cut off its access to energy sources, we might be able to slow its growth. But we'll need specialized equipment, people willing to take significant risks. Then assemble your team, Monroe said firmly, and make sure they know what they're up against. Back in the Arctic, Ethan Carter and Rachel Meyer were escorted to a secure facility for debriefing. They spent hours recounting their encounter with Erebus, answering question after question from officials eager to piece together the puzzle. Despite their exhaustion, neither of them could rest. The memory of those pulsating tendrils haunted their thoughts, playing over and over like a nightmare they couldn't escape. Ethan felt a deep sense of guilt gnawing at him. He had been the one to discover Erebus, to bring it into the light, literally and figuratively. Now, because of his actions, The world was facing a threat unlike anything it had ever known. "You couldn't have known," Rachel told him one evening, as they sat in the sterile confines of their temporary quarters. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were filled with determination. "You were doing your job, exploring, learning. That's what science is all about." "But look where it got us," Ethan replied bitterly. "We woke up something ancient, something smarter than us. And now it's out there, growing stronger every day." Rachel didn't argue. She wanted to believe they could fix this, but doubt lingered in the back of her mind. Erebus wasn't just intelligent, it was cunning. It had manipulated their equipment, disabled their communications, and even negotiated with Laura's team. How could humanity hope to fight something so advanced? As the days passed, protests erupted around the world. In major cities, crowds gathered to demand answers and action. Some groups called for immediate eradication of Erebus, advocating for military intervention to destroy it before it could spread further. Others argued for diplomacy, insisting that aggressive measures would only provoke retaliation. In Washington, D.C., tensions ran high as conflicting opinions clashed within the government. President Monroe struggled to maintain order, torn between the need for decisive action and the risk of escalating the situation. Meanwhile, Megan and Alex worked tirelessly to develop countermeasures, analyzing samples collected from the Arctic outpost. Their research revealed alarming information. Erebus thrived on energy sources, particularly electromagnetic fields and human brain activity. It fed on these energies, using them to grow and adapt. Worse still, it appeared to communicate through pulses of energy, creating networks that spanned vast distances. "This isn't just an organism," Alex said one night as he pored over data on his laptop. "It's a hive mind, a collective. Consciousness." Megan nodded, her face pale. "It's learning from us. Every interaction, every attempt to contain its absorbing information, finding new ways to survive." Alex looked up, his expression grim. "So what happens when it figures out how to harness human energy directly?" Megan didn't answer. She didn't need to. They both knew the implications. If Erebus learned to tap into human brains, it could manipulate entire populations or worse, consume them. While the scientific community raced to find solutions, Erebus continued to expand its reach. Reports poured in from remote locations where black tendrils had begun appearing without warning. Power grids failed, communication systems collapsed, and entire communities were left isolated. Governments scrambled to respond, deploying teams to investigate each outbreak. But Erebus always seemed one step ahead. In Siberia, a small village was engulfed overnight.
Ow.
Residents described strange noises coming from the forest before the tendrils emerged, creeping into homes and swallowing everything in their path. By the time authorities arrived, the village was deserted, its buildings coated in a thick layer of pulsating black mass. Similar incidents occurred in Canada and Antarctica, painting a chilling picture of Erebus's capabilities. It wasn't content to stay hidden anymore. It was asserting itself, testing humanity's defenses and pushing boundaries. Amidst the chaos, Laura Bennett led another mission to contain an outbreak in northern Canada. Her team arrived to find a scene eerily similar to the Arctic outpost. Frozen landscapes marred by black streaks, abandoned vehicles, and eerie silence. As they moved cautiously through the area, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that Erebus was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Stay alert," she warned her team, her voice low. "This thing learns fast. Don't give." At any openings, her words proved prophetic. As they set up containment barriers, the tendrils surged toward them, reacting to the electromagnetic field generated by their equipment. Sparks flew, and several members of the team were forced to retreat as the mass consumed their gear. Laura ordered everyone to power down their devices, mimicking the non-aggression tactic that had worked before. Slowly, the tendrils receded, retreating into the shadows. But Laura knew it was only temporary. Erebus was biding its time, gathering strength for its next move. Back in the lab, Megan and Alex made a breakthrough. Using data from the Arctic samples, they developed a prototype device capable of disrupting Erebus's neural pathways. The machine emitted a specific frequency designed to interfere with its energy-based communication network, effectively severing its connections. It's not perfect, Megan admitted as she showed the device to Harper and President Monroe. But it should buy us some time. Harper studied the contraption skeptically. Buy us time for what? To develop a permanent solution? Megan hesitated, or to prepare for the worst. The gravity of her words hung in the air. Everyone in the room understood what she meant. If Erebus couldn't be stopped, humanity might face extinction. President Monroe stood, her expression resolute. Then let's hope it never comes to that. Deploy the device wherever necessary, but tread carefully. One wrong move, and we could make things worse. As the meeting concluded, Megan and Alex exchanged uneasy glances. They had created a tool that might hold Erebus at bay for now. But deep down, they both knew the real battle was just beginning. Erebus was no longer dormant. It was awake, aware, and evolving. And as it spread across the globe, humanity found itself locked in a war it barely understood and one it might not survive. The world was holding its breath. Reports of Erebus's spread dominated every news outlet, filling screens with images of black tendrils consuming power lines, vehicles, and buildings. Governments issued emergency alerts urging citizens to stay indoors and avoid areas affected by the organism. Yet despite these warnings, chaos reigned. Panic buying emptied store shelves, highways clogged with people fleeing their homes in search of safety. In the secure facility where Ethan Carter and Rachel Meyer were being housed, tension simmered beneath the surface. Both scientists felt trapped not just by the walls of the building, but by the weight of responsibility pressing down on them. They had discovered Erebus, and though they hadn't intended to unleash it, many blamed them for the crisis unfolding worldwide. Ethan spent most of his time pacing the small room assigned to him, replaying the events at the Arctic outpost over and over in his mind. Couldn't shake the image of those tendrils spreading across the lab, consuming everything in their path. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the way Erebus reacted not like a blind force of nature, but like something calculating, deliberate. It scared him more than he cared to admit. Rachel tried to keep busy, poring over research papers and data sent to her by Megan Cole and Alex Rivera. She wanted to believe that humanity could find a way to coexist with Erebus, or at least contain it. But the more she learned about its behavior, the less hopeful she became. Erebus didn't negotiate, it adapted. It didn't retreat, it waited. And waiting was far more dangerous than outright aggression. One evening, as they sat together in the cafeteria, Rachel broke the silence. Do you think we'll ever understand it? Really understand it? Ethan looked up from his untouched plate. Of food, I don't know. Maybe. But even if we do, does that mean we can stop it? Rachel sighed, running a hand through her hair. Maybe stopping isn't the answer. What if we focused on finding a way to communicate instead? To show it we're not a threat. Ethan frowned. It already knows we're here. If it wanted peace, wouldn't it have shown some sign by now? Before Rachel could respond, a guard entered the room and motioned for them to follow. They were led to a conference room where Daniel Harper, Laura Bennett, and several other officials awaited them. The atmosphere was tense, charged with urgency. We've identified a new outbreak, Harper began without preamble. This time, it's closer to populated areas. We need your expertise, Ethan stiffened. Why us? You have teams trained for this kind of thing. Because you've seen Erebus firsthand, Laura interjected. You know how it behaves. That makes you valuable. Rachel glanced at Ethan, seeing the conflict in his eyes. She knew he wanted to help, but she also knew how much guilt he carried. What exactly are you asking us to do? She asked cautiously. Harper leaned forward, his voice firm. We're deploying the prototype device Dr. Cole developed. It disrupts Erebus's neural pathways, giving us a window to push it back. But someone needs to operate it from close range. Someone who understands the risks. Ethan's stomach churned. He didn't want to go near Erebus again, but he couldn't ignore the fact that he'd played a role in awakening it. If anyone should face the consequences, it was him. I'll do it, he said finally, his voice steady, despite the turmoil inside him. No, Rachel protested immediately. You can't. It has to be me, Ethan interrupted, looking at her. I started this. I owe it to everyone to try and fix it. Harper nodded approvingly. Good. You leave tomorrow. The next day, Ethan found himself aboard a military transport plane alongside Laura's team. The destination was a remote town in northern Canada, one of the latest sites affected by Erebus. From the air, the devastation was clear. Black streaks snaked across the landscape, swallowing trees, roads, and structures. Smoke rose from places where the organism had caused fires. Choking the sky with ash as they landed, Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't like the Arctic outpost. Here there were signs of life for what remained of it. Abandoned cars lined the streets, their windows shattered. Doors hung open, swinging in the wind. Toys lay scattered in yards left behind in haste. This place looks like a ghost town, Ryan Cole. Laura's second in command. It's muttered as they disembarked. It might as well be, Laura replied grimly. Let's move. The team advanced cautiously, scanning the area for any sign of movement. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of boots on gravel and the occasional groan of collapsing structures. Ethan carried the prototype device in a reinforced case slung over his shoulder. Its presence was both comforting and terrifying a lifeline, but also a reminder of what was at stake. They reached the heart of the outbreak, a large warehouse surrounded by thick clusters of black tendrils. The mass pulsed rhythmically, almost like breathing. As they approached, the tendrils twitched, reacting to their presence. Stay back, Ethan warned, setting the case down. He opened it carefully, revealing the device inside. It was compact, with wires and dials that glowed faintly in the dim light. Megan had explained how to use it during a hurried briefing, but Ethan's hands trembled as he adjusted the settings. You sure you know what you're doing? Laura asked, her tone sharp with concern. I think so, Ethan replied, though doubt gnawed him. He activated the device, which emitted a low hum. Immediately, the tendrils recoiled, retreating slightly. Encouraged, Ethan increased the frequency. But then something unexpected happened. One of the soldiers, a young private named Kyle Dawson, stepped forward, his expression oddly calm. Turn it off, he said firmly. Everyone turned to stare. At him, what did you say? Laura demanded. Kyle ignored her, focusing on Ethan. Turn it off now. Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to do. Before anyone could react, Kyle pulled out a small transmitter from his pocket and pressed a button. A burst of static filled the air, disrupting the device's signal. The tendrils surged forward, engulfing the ground around them. What the hell are you doing? Laura shouted, grabbing Kyle by the arm. He twisted free, his eyes blazing with conviction. You don't understand. Erebus isn't our enemy, superior to us in every way. We should embrace it, not fight it. You're insane, Ryan snapped, raising his weapon. No, I'm enlightened, Kyle yelled back. This organism is the future. Humanity is obsolete. Before anyone could stop him, Kyle sprinted toward the pulsating mass, disappearing into its depths. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then the tendrils began to writhe violently, glowing brighter as they absorbed whatever energy Kyle had provided. Get the device working again, Laura barked, snapping everyone out of their shock. Ethan scrambled to reboot the machine, his fingers fumbling with the controls. The tendrils were closing in fast, crackling with electricity. Finally, the device roared to life, emitting a high-pitched whine that made everyone cover their ears. The tendrils froze, then slowly receded, retreating into the shadows. For now, the immediate threat was neutralized, but the cost had been high. Kyle was gone, lost to Erebus. No one spoke as they regrouped, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a suffocating blanket. Back at the lab, Megan and Alex analyzed footage from the mission, trying to make sense of Kyle's actions. His betrayal raised troubling questions. Had Erebus somehow influenced him? Or had he been drawn to it willingly, seduced by its power? He believed it was better than us, Alex murmured, shaking his head. That's not just insanity, that's indoctrination. Megan stared at the screen, her expression troubled. If Erebus can manipulate people's minds, we're in bigger trouble than we thought.
Out.
Meanwhile, Ethan struggled to process what had happened. Kyle's words echoed in his mind. Humanity is obsolete. Was that true? Could Erebus really offer something greater than human existence? Or was it simply exploiting fear and doubt to further its own agenda? As the days passed, reports came in of similar incidents elsewhere. In Siberia, a scientist working on containment measures suddenly reversed course, advocating for surrender to Erebus. In Antarctica, an entire research team vanished without explanation, leaving behind only traces of black, tanned. It was becoming clear that Erebus wasn't just attacking physically, it was infiltrating minds, sowing discord and confusion. Humanity's greatest strength, its ability to think and reason, was being turned against it. President Monroe addressed the nation in a televised speech, her voice steady but tinged with desperation. We are facing a challenge unlike anything we have encountered before, but we will not give up. We will fight for our survival, for our future, and for the generations to come. Her words were met with mixed reactions. Some rallied behind her call to action, while others grew increasingly fearful. Protests escalated with riots breaking out in major cities. People demanded answers, solutions, anything to restore a sense of control. Amidst the chaos, Ethan found himself standing at a crossroads. He had volunteered to confront Erebus, knowing the risks. But now, faced with its growing influence, he wondered if bravery alone would be enough. Erebus wasn't just intelligent. It was patient, strategic, and relentless. And as it continued to adapt, humanity's chances of survival grew slimmer with each passing day. The world teetered on the edge of collapse. Erebus had spread far beyond containment zones, infiltrating cities and remote areas alike. Power grids flickered and failed, plunging entire regions into darkness. Communication networks were disrupted, leaving people isolated and afraid. Governments scrambled to respond, but their efforts felt like trying to hold back a flood with bare hands. The black tendrils of Erebus crept into streets, homes, and even underground bunkers. Consuming everything they touched, Ethan Carter sat in a dimly lit briefing room, staring at maps marked with red zones, indicating Erebus's presence. Each dot represented another outbreak, another community swallowed by the organism. He clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles white from the strain. Every day brought news of more devastation, more lives lost. Every day he carried the weight of knowing he had played a part in unleashing this nightmare. Rachel Meyer stood nearby, her arms crossed as she studied the same maps. She hadn't spoken much since returning from the Arctic, retreating into herself as guilt and fear gnawed at her resolve. But now, faced with the enormity of what was happening, she couldn't stay silent any longer. We're losing, Rachel said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. It's not just about containing it anymore. It's about survival. Ethan looked up, his expression grim. What do you mean? I mean, we can't keep fighting like this. Erebus is too fast, too smart. By the time we react, it's already moved on to the next target. Across the table, Daniel Harper rubbed his temples, fatigue etched deeply into his face. She's right, he admitted reluctantly. Our tactics aren't working. We need something drastic. Dr. Megan Cole stepped forward, holding a tablet, displaying schematics of the prototype device Ethan had used in Canada. There's only one option left, she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of her words. We destroy its core, the central hub, where all its neural pathways converge. Laura Bennett frowned, leaning against the wall. And where exactly is this core? Have you located it yet? Megan hesitated before nodding. Yes, based on data collected during previous missions, we've identified a possible location. Deep beneath the Arctic permafrost, near the original site. Ethan stiffened. You want us to go back there? It's the only way, Megan replied firmly. If we sever the connection between Erebus's fragments, we might be able to stop it Tor, at least slow it down enough for humanity to recover. Harper turned to Ethan, his gaze piercing. Are you willing to try? For a moment, Ethan didn't answer. The thought of returning to that frozen wasteland filled him with dread. But what choice did he have? If anyone could get close to Erebus's core, it was him. He had seen it firsthand, understood its patterns, and perhaps most importantly, he bore the responsibility for awakening it. "I'll do it," Ethan said finally, his voice low but resolute. Rachel stepped closer, her eyes wide with alarm. "You can't go alone. Let me come with you." "No," Ethan replied sharply. "This isn't your fight anymore. You've done enough." "Enough," Rachel shot back, her voice rising. "I helped uncover Erebus just as much as you did. I'm not letting you shoulder this alone." Before their argument could escalate further, Laura intervened. "Both of you listen. This mission requires precision, not emotion. Ethan, you'll lead the infiltration team because you know how Erebus behaves. Rachel, you'll stay here and assist Megan and Alex with analyzing real-time data. That's your role." Reluctantly, Rachel nodded, though her frustration simmered just below the surface. She watched as Ethan turned away, his jaw clenched tightly. Deep down, she knew he was trying to protect her, but it didn't make saying goodbye any easier. Days later, Ethan found himself once again standing on Arctic soil, surrounded by snow and ice. The air was biting cold, sharp enough to cut through layers of thermal clothing. Beside him, Laura's team prepared for the descent into the frozen depths where Erebus's core was believed to reside. As they approached the entrance, a jagged fissure carved into the permafrost, Ethan felt a strange sense of déjà vu. This place had changed him forever, shaping the course of his life in ways he never could have imagined. Now, it would decide whether humanity survived or fell to Erebus. The journey downward was treacherous, icy walls closing in around them. As they descended deeper into the earth, strange noises echoed through the tunnels, low hums and faint crackles that sent shivers down everyone's spines. They weren't alone. Erebus knew they were coming. When they reached the cavern housing Erebus's core, the sight took their breath away. The chamber pulsed with an eerie luminescence, black tendrils writhing across the ceiling and floor like living veins. In the center stood a massive, pulsating mass, the heart of Erebus itself. It radiated energy so intense that it made the air shimmer. "This is it," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the thrumming noise filling the space. "The source." Laura signaled for her team to set up perimeter defenses while Ethan activated the prototype device. Its controls glowed faintly as he adjusted the frequency, targeting the core electromagnetic field. The machine emitted a soft whine, growing louder as it powered up. Suddenly, the tendrils surged toward them, reacting violently to the disruption. Sparks flew as they lashed out, attempting to disable the device. Ethan gritted his teeth, refusing to let go even as his hands burned from the heat radiating off the machine. "Hold your ground," Laura shouted, firing bursts of energy from her weapon to keep the tendrils at bay. Her team followed suit, creating a defensive barrier around Ethan. But Erebus wasn't giving up without a fight. The core began to emit a deafening roar, shaking the cavern violently. Cracks formed in the icy walls, threatening to collapse the entire structure. Dust and shards of ice rained down, forcing everyone to duck for cover. Ethan glanced at the device, sweat dripping down his face despite the freezing temperatures. The readings indicated that the disruption was working, but not fast enough. Erebus was adapting, finding ways to counteract the signal. "We don't have much time," Ethan yelled, his voice hoarse. "I need to get closer." "No," Laura shouted back, grabbing his arm. "It'll kill you." "It's already killing everyone else," Ethan snapped, pulling free. Without hesitation, he charged toward the core, clutching the device in both hands. The tendrils swarmed around him, wrapping around his legs and torso, dragging him toward the pulsating mass. Pain seared through Ethan's body as the tendrils tightened their grip. His vision blurred, but he refused to give up. Summoning every ounce of strength, he activated the device's final setting, a concentrated burst of energy designed to overload Erebus's neural pathways. The cavern erupted in light and sound as the device discharged, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The tendrils recoiled, releasing Ethan as they dissolved into ash. The core shuddered violently, its glow fading until it collapsed inward. Consumed by its own instability, Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping for air as the tremors subsided. Darkness enveloped the cavern, broken only by the faint glow of emergency lights carried by Laura's team. For a moment, no one moved, too stunned to process what had just happened. Then, slowly, reality sank in. Erebus's core was gone. The network connecting its fragments had been severed. Though remnants of the organism still existed elsewhere, they were now isolated, unable to communicate or coordinate. Laura rushed to Ethan's side, helping him to his feet. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with disbelief. "You actually did it?" Ethan managed a weak smile, though exhaustion weighed heavily on him. "For now," he replied softly, "but this isn't over. Not completely." As the team made their way back to the surface, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Erebus wasn't truly defeated. It had been pushed back, weakened, but not destroyed. Somewhere, buried deep within the earth, fragments of the organism lingered, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Above ground, Rachel waited anxiously for news of the mission. When Ethan emerged from the transport plane, battered but alive, relief washed over her like a tidal wave. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him in a tight embrace. "You came back," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. Ethan held her close, closing his eyes as he savored the warmth of human connection. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel hope not just for himself, but for humanity as a whole. But even as celebrations began in cities around the world, whispers of caution spread among scientists and leaders alike. Erebus had taught them a harsh lesson. Intelligence and adaptability were double-edged swords. Humanity had survived this round, but the war was far from won. And somewhere unnoticed by the jubilant crowds, a single tendril stirred in the shadows, pulsing faintly with life. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief. For the first time in months, the skies cleared of black tendrils and power grids hummed back to life. News outlets declared victory over Erebus, hailing Ethan Carter and his team as heroes. Arctic mission had succeeded. Erebus's core was destroyed, severing the network that connected its fragments. Cities began to rebuild, families reunited, and governments turned their focus toward recovery. But beneath the surface, cracks remained. Fragments of Erebus still lingered in remote corners of the planet, dormant but not dead. Scientists worked tirelessly to locate and neutralize these remnants. Knowing full well that complacency could lead to another outbreak, humanity had bought itself time, but at what cost? Ethan stood on the balcony of a government facility, staring out at the horizon. It was a sunny day, the kind that made people forget about the darkness they'd endured. Yet Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, waiting. He clenched the railing tightly, his knuckles white from the strain. Rachel approached quietly, her footsteps soft against the tiled floor. She placed a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. "You did everything you could," she said, gently. No one could ask for more. Ethan didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and heavy with doubt. "Did I, though?" He stopped it. "Sure, but we didn't understand it." "Not really. What if we missed something? What if it comes back stronger next time?" Rachel sighed, leaning against the railing beside him. "We'll deal with that when it happens. For now, we've earned the right to rest." Ethan shook his head. Rest felt impossible. Every night he dreamed of black tendrils wrapping around him, pulling him into an endless void. He woke up drenched, in sweat, heart pounding, unable to shake the image of Erebus's core collapsing, but not disappearing entirely. Meanwhile, Megan Cole and Alex Rivera published their findings in scientific journals, urging caution as the world moved forward. Their research revealed unsettling truths. Erebus wasn't just intelligent, it was ancient. Its origins predated human civilization by millions of years, suggesting it had survived countless extinction events. If humanity hoped to avoid becoming another casualty of history, it would need to rethink their approach to unknown organisms. "We can't keep treating things like Erebus as enemies," Megan argued during a televised interview. "They're not monsters, they're survivors. Our challenge is learning how to coexist without repeating past mistakes." Her words resonated with some, but others dismissed them as naive. Protests erupted outside government buildings, with groups demanding stricter measures to ensure Erebus never returned. Military stockpiled weapons designed to combat biological threats, while private companies invested billions in developing containment technologies. In Washington, D.C., President Katherine Monroe addressed the nation once again. Her tone was measured but firm. "We have faced the greatest threat in our history and we have prevailed. Let this be a lesson to us all. Curiosity drives progress, but it must be tempered with responsibility. Let us move forward together, united in our determination to protect this planet and everything on it." Her speech was met with applause, but behind closed doors, tension simmered. Daniel Harper and other military leaders pushed for continued surveillance of affected areas, fearing Erebus might resurface. Funding for research skyrocketed, as did calls for international cooperation. Humanity had been given a second chance, and no one wanted to waste it. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly returned to normal, or at least as close to normal as possible. Ethan and Rachel resumed their work, though neither felt the same passion they once had. The weight of what they'd witnessed lingered, shaping their perspective in ways they couldn't fully articulate. One evening, Ethan attended a memorial service held in honor of those who had lost their lives to Erebus. Among the names read aloud was Kyle Dawson, the soldier who had willingly surrendered himself to the organism. As Ethan listened to the stories shared by grieving families, he felt a pang of guilt mixed with sorrow. Kyle had believed Erebus represented the future, a superior form of existence. Was there any truth to that belief, or had he simply been manipulated? After the ceremony, Ethan wandered through the quiet streets, lost in thought. A child's laughter caught his attention, drawing him to a nearby park. There, a young boy played in the snow, building a small fort out of ice blocks. His cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, and his eyes sparkled with joy. Ethan watched silently, reminded of the resilience of life. No matter how dark things became, there was always light if only people chose to see it. As he turned to leave, something glinted in the corner of his eye. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. Embedded in the snow near the boy's feet was a thin, black tendril, barely visible under the pale winter sun. It twitched faintly, pulsing with a faint glow. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to shout to warn the boy, but fear rooted him to the spot. Before he could act, the child reached down and picked up the tendril, examining it curiously. "What is this?" the boy asked, holding it up to the light. His smile widened as he turned to show his parents. Oblivious to the danger in his hands, Ethan took a step forward, then stopped. He knew better than anyone that Erebus thrived on curiosity, the very trait that defined humanity. Destroying it outright might buy time, but it wouldn't solve the underlying problem. If humanity wanted to survive, they needed to learn not just about Erebus, but about themselves. With a heavy heart, Ethan walked away, leaving the boy to marvel at his discovery. The tendril pulsed brighter, responding to the warmth of the child's touch. Somewhere deep within, Erebus stirred, patient and calculating. Back at the lab, Megan and Alex reviewed satellite images showing traces of energy spikes in previously unaffected regions. Each anomaly raised new questions, hinting at the possibility of undiscovered fragments. They worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and determination. "I don't think we'll ever truly get rid of it," Alex admitted, breaking the silence. "Not completely." Megan nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe the real test is figuring out how to live alongside it." Alex frowned. "You sound like Ethan." "Do I?" Megan smiled faintly. "Maybe he's smarter than we give him credit for." Elsewhere, Laura Bennett led training exercises for teams tasked with monitoring Erebus activity. She drilled them, relentlessly emphasizing discipline and teamwork. Though the immediate threat had passed, she refused to let her guard down. Experience had taught her that peace was fragile and, often fleeting, as the seasons changed, so too did the world. Buildings rose from ruins, scars healed, and memories faded. But in the shadows, Erebus waited, biding its time. It had learned much from its encounter with humanity, and it was far from finished. In the end, the story wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about adaptation, survival, and the enduring struggle to find balance in a universe filled with mysteries. Humanity had taken its first steps toward understanding Erebus, but the journey was far from over, and somewhere, in the depths of the earth, a single tendril pulsed faintly, whispering promises of what was yet to come.